trimesters. And so thank you for prioritizing this conference and coming. We're all going to be talking about deepening our practice. And the idea is that you've been working on something around NGSS and that this is the opportunity for you to meet with affinity groups or like-minded people to get deeper into that element of practice. We also want to say a shout out to Tri Association for their continuing support. Dr. Adams isn't able to be here because I believe he's at a MISA, but he sends his well wishes and we always appreciate his support of science learning. We'd like for you to rename yourself. This is going to help us do affinity groups after Dr. Imogen's keynote. And so we're going to want to have some conversations with people that are in similar positions to ourselves. We also want to know how many groups to make so we don't overburden it depending on our people who are attending.
If you're not sure how to do that, if you hover your arrow over the panel with your video on it, there's 3 dots. Click on that, click rename, and you should be able to type K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12, or K through 12 right there in front of your name, and that'll help us make those groups.
Yes. It is not working. There could be potentially some pandemic era lockdown restrictions in the Zoom. Remember when we did not want students to rename themselves after Fortnite characters and things like that? That might still be a residual thing. So give us a couple of seconds. We'll reboot the settings to appropriately show that we're working with adults, and we'll let you know when you can rename yourselves. So I'll give a reminder in a little bit.
Sorry, you have to go to participants and find your name in participants.
Thank you for that hack.
All right. So we'd like to welcome some new and old faces at the same time.
As previously mentioned in the November conference, Brett and I are changing regions, and so we wanted the NGSS partnership in Tri to be run by Tri educators. So we were lucky enough that Lori Fine and Katie Neal from Colegio Bolivar and American Nicaraguan School have graciously said that they would take the mantle up and keep this amazing community going. So we just wanted to give a big round of applause. They've been working behind the scenes, planning this whole conference. If we remember in Zoom, you can go to reactions and you can kind of do like a clap, or you can do like a little heart emoji. We got a party symbol going on. Yes, it's definitely going to be a party with Katie and Lori for sure. Their senses of humor are on fire. So we want to say thank you to the incoming regional leaders, and you're going to hear a lot more from them as the conference goes on. And we just wanted to give an update, Britta and I, about where we're going to and how we will definitely not be strangers to the Tri Association region. I'm going to be moving to Baku, Azerbaijan. You only know that if you're a Formula One fan, so don't stress if like you couldn't put that on a map. You might Google it later and find out it's a really tiny country sandwiched between Iran and Russia. I'm really excited because I'm going to continue being a coach, but also do curriculum coordination. And Britta, do you want to tell everyone where you're off to?
Also a place that's big with Formula One. I didn't know that that was also an Azerbaijan thing, but yep, I'll be at the American International School of Jeddah in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and moving into a role that's similar to mine now, but the title is Director of Learning. I don't know if I'll get to do as much explicit science work there, but I'm excited for moving to a new region. So Heather and I, and also I don't know if you all remember John Mark. John Mark will be in Oman. We'll be like the East edition of NGSS Partnership, and then Katie and Lori will be all with you all here in the West.
We wanted to capstone our NGSS partnership history. It began in the pandemic with our first conference with just Colombian schools. And now over 2.5 years later, we are doing our 6th conference around deepening practices. And we just want to celebrate. We'll do a bit more in the closing ceremony, but we just want to celebrate. If this is your first one, awesome. If this is your 6th one, amazing job being along for the journey.
So in terms of deepening our practice and knowing that we have beginners here as well as people that have been to all 6 conferences, we really want everybody to have something for them. So to give you an idea of how we planned that out for you, no matter where you are in your journey, we have 3 sessions today and 5 sessions tomorrow. In session 1, after we do our kickoff, you'll be with Imogen, and she's going to be our keynote today. We are going to be learning some very important things and a call to action from her work. And we'll be thinking about that and talking about that in job-alike groups just after the keynote. So you'll also have a partnership moment where you'll get to connect with other people in those job-alike groups. Hopefully we can rename our names by then, but if not, don't worry, we'll figure it out. In session 2, we have what we put a hashtag on in our program, hashtag greatest hit. A greatest hit offering is something that has already been given at one of the conferences, but because there's been 6 of them and so many of us are new or needing refreshers, we're offering things that got strong feedback in earlier programs and earlier conferences, and we're offering them again. And we're also throwing in some new things. So there in session 2, you have 50-minute deepening your practice sessions of your choice. One of them is with Thelma Blandon in Spanish, in Espanol. And there will be another one in day 2 that's also in Spanish. And then for session 3, we have our classic showcases. All of the middle school, high school people will be going at the same time. And all of the EYES people will be with Heather. The curricular exploration is a new innovation for this conference. We have so many questions about what program should we buy, what textbook should we adopt, what should we do? So this is just a little space that we made for you to hear about some different possibilities in EYES. And then tomorrow we'll be doing that for MSHS as well. So a quick shout out to Thelma, Rodrigo, Heather, Katie, Helen, Carolina, and Kendall and Brooke, who are all of the teachers that are supporting the partnership program on day 1. On day 2, in those 5 sessions, sessions 1 and 3 are teacher practice keynotes. So what you'll get to do in those sessions is listen to a teacher talk about their NGSS journey and hone in on some part of their practice. So very exciting. We have Dr. Wojtek, Alan, Blair, and Jason with us tomorrow for those keynotes. In session 2, we have the EYES showcases and the MSHS curricular exploration. So different than EYES, we have 4 teachers sharing different curricular programs that they use in middle and high school. So you'll jump into that link, choose the breakout room, and you'll be able to listen to other educators talk about what they're using, how it's worked for them, and give you a bit of a testimonial. And then those showcases will be the tried and true. You'll be looking at assessments, units, or lessons and student work that teachers are actually using in their classroom. And finally, session 4, these are also deepening your practice sessions. They're a little bit shorter than day 1. They're 35 minutes. And we'll be welcoming John Mark back for a greatest hit, as well as offering some new things in those deepening practice sessions. So if you've been to all 6 of the conferences, do check the description. If it is a greatest hit, there's a possibility you've seen it before, but it might be something that is your first time if you're new, or if you were choosing between sessions before. And we'll have a very quick closing ceremony to end the day tomorrow. So that's what we've got set up for you in our program. What's up, Heather?
No, I was going to say that we do have some dedicated beginner sessions, and you can see that they're noted in green. So like Katie and Thelma are doing things that are really suitable for people. If like this is your first NGSS partnership conference, or you're feeling like you really want some foundational work, please go to those. They're in English and Spanish, flip-flopping on alternate days. So that way you're really going to understand. We're gonna talk big now, but then like when you go to those sessions, you'll understand what it all means.
Yep. So green is for beginners or people that would like a refresher. And then these sessions in orange, those are particularly built with an administrative or coordination lens, but teachers are also welcome to attend those. if the topic is of interest to you, or if you're a science point person that does some leadership at your school already. I think I forgot to say the names. So shout out on day 2, we'll have Louisa, Kat, Joanna, Jenna, Ben, Claire, Caitlin, David, Christina, Thelma, Katina, did I forget anyone? And John Mark. I think I said the other names on day 1, as well as our keynoters. So we have lots of awesome people here with us. This is what makes the partnership a partnership, is all of the people from different schools that are showing up with their work, their assessments, their lessons, their questions, or just showing up to learn and create this place where we do that together for science. Everyone that is leading a space has their bios on the 3rd page of the program tab, so feel free to check that out. And a quick reminder, those blue ones, the showcases, those are really a dual purpose session. So we have been getting some showcases in past conferences where people go into the showcases, the camera is off, they don't talk as much, but those are meant to be a very interactive, high leverage space. So for you as a participant, when you enter a showcase, what your role is to see what other teachers are doing and to provide 3D learning, or what they're doing to provide 3D learning experiences, and to gain familiarity with the 3D screening tool, which looks like this. So you're going to be given a tool that tells you about some of those important points in NGSS. And if you're a beginner, you use this tool to anchor your understanding and try to develop your critical lens, as well as give the presenter some feedback, because really this, operating like a giant PLC, is a place where we want to get better and deepen our practice. So those presenters are there looking for you to validate the great work that they're doing, or give them constructive feedback on how they can improve lessons, assessments, how they can analyze student work in order to make those student learning experiences better. So this is just a reminder to please be interactive in the showcases, camera on and mic on whenever possible. And if you're a beginner, don't be shy, have no pena, as they say. Just show up, use the tools, and do the best that you can to create that partnership in those spaces.
All right, here I am making my debut as the facilitator to remind everyone that this is an amazing organization where we have 54 schools coming from 3 regional areas, and we all come together to make the Tri-Association, coming from 12 countries in Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. And we have 4 partnership goals that were originally established with the dream team of Britta, Heather, and John Mark, and really have stayed true and helped us form all of these things: enhancing student learning, our relevant strategies for instruction. We really want to improve assessment, and you'll see that through our showcases. And we have this wonderful community of partnership and science educators.
Can I use this as an opportunity to apologize? When I downloaded this slideshow, I didn't realize how many pills were on it. This is like an epidemiology slide set. And then I was like, man, there are a lot of syringes and pills on this. Wasn't going for that thematically, but it's going to show up here and there.
Okay. And when we think about doing NGSS, how do we know if we're doing NGSS? Well, when your students are figuring something out or solving something, they're doing NGSS. When they're engaging with phenomena and problems to sustain inquiry, and when we're learning and being assessed on the 3 dimensions, our science and engineering practices, our cross-cutting concepts, and our disciplinary core ideas. And here I'll do a plug that if you were like, what are all those words? You can come to my NGSS 101 presentation and I can talk to you more about that then. And last but not least, this amazing resource board has evolved and developed throughout the 6 conferences. It's an awesome tool for everyone to use. You know, if you need a little bit more information about understanding, if you're looking for something about phenomena or assessments, or if you're just starting that process of moving to NGSS, Britta, Heather, and John Mark did a great job putting together a really comprehensive set of resources there.
And we'll drop that in the chat in just a moment.
And without further ado, I would like to welcome my friend, former colleague, Imogen Herrick. Imogen used to be a teacher, a science teacher, and an instructional coach at Colegio Bolivar. And then she went to the University of Southern California to pursue her PhD, which is in the very, very final stages of development. And next year, Imogen will be an assistant professor of STEM education at the University of Kansas. So she's here today to talk to us about constructing hope and using data to deepen STEM engagement. So welcome, Imogen.
Thanks, Katie. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. It's really wonderful to be back in connection with the Tri-Association. I have many memories of amazing Tri-Association conferences that I attended across the years. When I was in Columbia, I can particularly remember one at CNG, and if you were there, you remember. But it's really nice to be reconnected with this group. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. So I got a shout out to Lauren and Anna and Wojtek and others that I have had the pleasure of working alongside years ago, and it's really fun to see you. So today, what are we going to talk about? Well, you just heard a lot. If you're new to NGSS, I just heard all of the terms that NGSS uses. And just like Katie said, it can surely sound like a lot of soup if you don't know all of the terms. But what we're going to talk about today and the things that we're going to look at today are practices that you could pick up no matter where you're at on your journey. And that's really important to me because NGSS at the beginning can feel overwhelming. And even when you're a couple of years in, you're still making sense of how to do this work. So there's always a place to dive in and learn more. And it's always a good time to get started. So what I'm going to talk about today, from the title, you may be thinking that we're going to get into a lot of math, but we're going to define data broadly here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we will get started. I'll make sure. All right, you all are seeing that, correct? Just making sure. Thumbs up. Awesome. We're going to define data really broadly, but just to get started, a very quick overview of who I am. And if you see little numbers in my slide deck, I've been fighting this all day. I don't know where they're coming from. So it's like a scavenger hunt. So I'm originally from Kentucky. I was a teacher for 12 years. Instructional coach. I taught in Title I schools. I taught in the international system. I'm nationally board certified. I've also been a consultant for schools, including Bolivar after I left. And I do some consulting here for LAUSD and some other places around. I also do some research. And I just got off of a project with the La Brea Tar Pits Museum where we designed some augmented reality creatures to make the past come to life on the actual grounds of the museum. So there's our nice woolly mammoth. If you too would like to hang out with an AR creature, let me know and I'll send you some QR card. But what I do now is I research STEM learning and I research how can we create better spaces for our students to engage in real world problems. But to begin, and I do this in my classroom and I recommend this, I just want to ground all of us because it's 3:30 here in LA. I heard Britta, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. It's a different time for a lot of us, but I know that we've all had a lot that has happened today already. So we're all coming into this space and learning, and I just want to do kind of a little grounding exercise where you really kind of take notice, take a breath, find yourself in the place and think to yourself, what is the state of your personal atmosphere right now? Has it been a good day? Has it been a challenging day? So as you guys are just grounding yourself and thinking about your emotions and the kind of ways that your body feels and the senses, just go ahead and drop in the chat if you feel like you want to, some words to describe your personal atmosphere. The whole point is to check in. Take a moment and recalibrate to the space that we're in together. And Katie, I don't know if you could just pop in and tell us some of those chats since you're there.
It's a lot of blue skies and clear, but then there's also
Fantastic.
blue
Everybody's
skies
had a
with
good.
chance of rain.
Well, that's great.
Foggy. We got some foggy people.
It's finally not raining in LA, which has actually been kind of a thing lately. So it's very sunny. So I'm in a good mood because it's beautiful. But the whole idea of a grounding exercise is for us to come to this space and really think to ourselves, whatever our atmosphere is, how is it serving us in this moment? And how can we take a deep breath in so that no matter what our atmosphere is, it serves us better in this moment that we're coming to together. So just take a second and think about that and move forward. So I've shown this video a couple of times. I know Lauren's going to remember it because we used it in some of our presentations, but we're going to start here with a little video. And as you're watching, I just want you to think about, what does this video tell us about how young people view and solve problems? And if you think of something, drop it in the chat as it's playing. Hopefully you'll have sound.
सर आपके लिए उस पार कार का इंतजाम किया है सर। सर आइए सर। ये चल चल। जाओ बोला क्या बात करता है, क्या ऊपर से जाएगा, क्या ऊपर से जा जा। गया मेन शो।
I hate this country. कुछ करो ना।
अब मैं वहाँ जाके क्या उखाड़ लूँगा?
कैसी जाने बूंदे आई, जाने कैसा दर्द लाई, सामने क्या है ये तेरे, क्यों रुका है तू बता रे हो। कौन तुझको पार लेगा, कौन होगा वो मसीहा, जिसे तू ढूंढता है वो ही है तू वही है। तुझ में तेरा रास्ता है, तुझ में तेरा है सहारा, तू ही तुझको पार लेगा, तू ही है तेरा किनारा। रास्ता है, तुझ में तेरा है सहारा, तू ही तुझको पार लेगा, तू ही है तेरा किनारा। जिसे ढूंढता है तू ही रे, तू ही रे, तू ही रे तेरा मसीहा हो।
All right, I see a couple of things. They're willing to get their hands dirty. They're not afraid. Children have fabulous ideas and need community help to realize goals, determined, incorporate joy. So you guys get it. Kids think about things a little differently than we do. In fact, everybody was just willing to wait, but this kid started moving the tree. And at first, everybody looked at him like he was crazy, but who was the first to jump in and support the child in what they were thinking about? Other children. Right? So the kids were the ones that started this movement, and the adults came along. And that's sort of what this work that I've been doing is all about. So if we think about science learning, everybody's talking about equity. In fact, everybody in education is talking about equity. That's the word that we put into all of our plans, but everybody defines it a little bit differently. So this is how I define, and Daniel Morales Doyle also defines equity, and it's preparing students to survive in the world as it is, right? Giving them the tools that they need, while we inspire them to imagine and fight for a world in which they and others would thrive. So in my work, what we're trying to do is we're trying to prepare kids for the world as it is. So teaching them but we also are trying to center them as the solution creators that they are. And we're trying to help them construct hope for their futures. And NGSS can be done in this way, because when we prepare kids, what we're really doing is we're teaching them what they need to know to be able to solve problems. So we're giving them those disciplinary core ideas. That's part of the 3D vision, right? And when we center them as solution creators, we're really helping them figure out how to do things with that knowledge that they've learned. What can they do with it? Those science and engineering practices that kids engage with. And when we're helping them construct hope for their futures, what we're really doing is we're helping them think across broad lines. We're helping them look across cross-cutting concepts, not just in science, but in interdisciplinary ways. And so that kind of gets us to why NGSS ever came about in the first place. Why change? What was it? Why did we need these standards? Well, it's because when we traditionally were teaching science, we as the teachers and as the scientists were telling kids what they needed to know to learn science. We were giving them that mechanical science knowledge, right? And then we were setting up laboratories so that they could prove the knowledge that we already knew. And once in a while, we would lean in and we'd give them like a real world hook to try to get them engaged. And that was how we traditionally started science teaching. Then NGSS came around. This is kind of more of our contemporary science, right? And we're really looking at equity. So instead of it going from the teachers and the scientists to the kids and only a couple of kids being able to access it, right? We've flipped it and we were like, kids need to engage in science and engineering practices. They need to do science. That's going to get more kids engaged in doing science. And so that's our equitable goal here. And as they use those science and engineering practices, they kind of uncover different things about phenomena or design solutions or models to solve problems. And what we found that does is that actually helps students become agents of their own learning. They're able to ask questions, they're able to solve problems. But what I'm trying to work us towards, and a bunch of us in this field are trying to work towards, is moving past this contemporary vision to what's next? What's the future of NGSS? Where do we go? And where we go is really changing this message of equity towards justice and student advocacy, trying to inspire kids to act. Why? Because there are so many socio-scientific problems that exist in our world that are impacting communities. And students need to make sense of those things, not only so that they can understand them, but also so that they can become these informed and responsible citizens that can make decisions and or support communities in ways that they think make sense. So we're really helping them become advocates for their own communities. But the question around these things is, how do we get there? How do we we're just now understanding NGSS. We're still making sense of NGSS. So how do we get there within the visions that we already have? And that's what my work centers around, is really trying to move towards this justice-centered world where our overarching goal is this. We want to integrate content so that kids can become these informed and responsible citizens. No problem, right? That's a big goal. It's really hard to do. So today, instead of trying to tackle that, today we're going to tackle smaller steps towards these opportunities to think about science learning for the purpose of advocacy and community health and wellness. I offer today what I call flexible practices. Flexible practices are things that you can do in your classroom whenever you want to, whatever grade level you teach, whatever content you might be teaching at the moment, and however much experience you have teaching or with the next generation science standards. Because what flexible practices are, they're practices that you can pick up and do tomorrow, but also practices that you could spend 4 or 5 years deepening. And so this goes in with your all's theme of deepening your practices. Flexible practices are ways to deepen them. And I have a lot of flexible practices, but we're going to talk about 2 today. And these 2 are really focused on trying to uncover and elicit student ideas around socio-scientific issues, so that we can better support them in becoming informed and responsible citizens. Oh, the two flexible practices we're going to talk about today, one is called Photo Voice. The other one is called Community Science Data Talks. And both of these have been done in the United States, but also in Colombia at Colegio Bolivar with a teacher. One of the teachers in this group has actually been a part of both of them. Well, Wojtek, thank you. Hello. Wojtek actually participated in both of these projects, so it's kind of fun that he's here today. So to begin, why? Why would we need to uncover students' ideas? Well, it's because students have experiences, emotions, and ideas about climate change, about water quality, about all sorts of scientific ideas that exist within our communities. But the problem is especially when it comes to things like climate change, we tend to globalize the ways that we talk about these things. We tend to remove them from the places that students live. And when we do that, that sanitizes it for them and actually doesn't help them feel any better about these impending kind of existential scientific topics that exist in our news and our world. In fact, when we don't center these ideas in places that kids know, they feel anxious and hopeless and sad about those things. And those emotions actually limit their ability to make sense of them. However, we find when we actually center them in place and we center students' voices, center the places that they live, they are able to productively process those emotions into constructive hope. And I'm going to talk about that word for a second, because hope is an emotion that can be activating and it can be deactivating. Deactivating hope is when we hope for something that we'll never achieve. So if I hope that I am going to win the lottery, I could get there, but I'm not really sure how I'm going to get there. It's just this esoteric hope that I have. So it's not super activating. But if I hope for something that I might have steps that I know how to take to get there, that is an activated version of hope. And that is what we call constructive hope, because you're constructing how your hope becomes a reality. And so what we see is when we center place and we center voice, we see hope. Photo Voice is a project. Photo Voice has been around for a really long time. And what it is it's allow kids to take cameras and show you how they see different things. And so it also is a way for kids to take those photos and to explain their thinking. It's also a way for kids to take photos of ideas that they have when they don't have the language around how to explain what they think. So Photo Voice is kind of this way for kids to really share their ideas and to participate in critical dialogue with other kids and or you to promote not only understanding, but reflection and empowerment of their situation. And what are the questions that kids might use with Photo Voice? Well, we have kids go out and take pictures, and there's this reflection called a showed reflection that they do with their pictures. So you're getting kids to go and think about something and then take their thoughts and reflect on those thoughts and write or talk, depending on how you might implement this. So the idea is really to get kids to uncover how they think about things and then for them to re-examine their own thoughts as they do that. What does it help you do? Why is it flexible? Well, it helps you center their voices and encourage their sharing of ideas for the ability of everybody to kind of share their knowledge and construct new knowledge as a community. So let's look at some examples. So what I did was in one of the studies that I did this with, so we asked kids, we gave fifth graders cameras. I think Wojtek, you did it with high school kids, with 10th graders. So again, flexible practice can be done with any age group. We gave fifth graders cameras and said, where do you see impacts of climate change in your everyday lives? And they went out and took pictures. So just right now, take a second, drop in the chat. If you were prompted with this, what might you take a picture of? Category 5 hurricanes. a lake flooding, frequent flooding, plastic garbage, algae blooms, receding lake. You guys are full of ideas, right? Landslides on my street. Same. How about these photos? Oops. See, how about these two photos? Let's take a look at these two. These are two photos that fifth graders took. Take a second, and what do you notice and what do you wonder? What do you think these kids were trying to uncover and share that they knew about climate impacts here with these photos? Take a stab at it. Black walkway gets really hot, habitat removal, deforestation, weathering and erosion, question mark? Erosion at a beach, air quality. Okay, and I think this other one's going to come in. I'm not sure what's up. Here's another one. What about that one? Acid rain, deforestation, water rationing, drought. Let's find out. All right, so here's this picture of a beach, right? Construction equipment. What did this fifth grader say when asked why they took this picture? Bryce said, when I was a kid, I didn't know anything about climate change. I thought that cars were good and used on a daily basis, and I didn't know that they were running on gasoline. I didn't realize that they're running on gas, which comes from the ground, you know, fossil fuels, which burning makes the greenhouse effect, which affects trees. But CAT, the construction equipment, it's like the same as a car. And I was just reflecting that it was just about the same thing as a car. I had not thought of that before, that construction equipment runs on gas like cars. So here now we're understanding Bryce making a connection, having an aha moment in his life, and he's sharing that, and he would share that with his group as well. Let's look at the other one. What else did we have? We had this table. This is a table. Some people thought it was a pavement. This was from Alan. He said there were a lot of fires in San Diego, so this is just ash from the table. It's not the first time. Usually whenever the air quality is bad and there's been fires, we just find ash everywhere on the outdoor furniture. Definitely, I've seen it a lot more lately. So here's Alan. Alan's experiencing some impacts from climate change, and he's noticing it. He's also noticing the frequency of it. How about that watering can? Kind of a strange one. What's Alfie got to say about this? He said those plants, they're mainly for like decoration and those kinds of purposes. So I feel like we're using all this water, and the picture just shows that we're using so much water on these things and we're wasting so much water. I don't know, watering or just wasting water in general could also be represented by this image. It's bad to use a lot of water because not only we're recently in a ginormous like 3-year drought. So here, same classroom of students, we have kids that have just realized that gasoline-powered vehicles exist outside of the realm of cars. Next, kids realizing that the fires are causing this ash on his table, and it's happening more often. And this other kid saying, my mom's got all these decorative plants, and I keep telling her not to water them because we're in this drought. So like, I really don't know why we're watering decorative plants. We should be watering plants that needs. So here we've uncovered these ideas and kids have shared them. But the progression of photo voice isn't just that, it's for them to individually reflect. So here's another picture of this hawk on a balcony. And this is one of those reflection questions. Sierra says, you know, what's happening here is the hawk had to use my balcony because it was hot. And he probably lost his habitat because of the fires, and now he uses my balcony. So here Sierra is talking about animal habitat loss and trying to understand and reckon with that. Here's another example. Here's a what did you see here? They've taken a picture of a power plant, and Bryce says, I see the sky is full of smoke from the factory burning fossil fuels. I noticed a house nearby and trees. The house is close to the factory, and the people that live in the house probably don't have clean air to breathe. So now he's making sense of the fact that there's a house really close to this factory and trying to make sense of how that works out for those people that live there. These are deep reflections for fifth graders, and it's a lot different than talking about climate change from a perspective of polar bears and ice caps and ice core data. Here, we're talking about community and wellness and their own ideas, and we're driving instruction from those points. And so what we do with those kids that have the top 5, they go in, they talk about their pictures with a friend, and they share their reflections, those 5 questions that they wrote down with their friends. And together they co-construct knowledge as they're sharing their photos. And then we put them in groups and we had them sort their photos. So like, here's an example of some kids sorting them on Padlet. They tried to sort some of their photos into pictures. So they're trying to generate themes. How are we seeing the impacts of climate as a classroom community? What are we noticing? And when they did this, the teacher and myself looked at it, gave them feedback, sent them things to read, videos to watch, things that they might need to understand so that their pictures could make more sense. So we gave them some feedback and we let them do some research. And then we said, go back to your pictures, go back to your themes, reorganize them, tell us about the themes this time, right? Sometimes they dropped a picture, sometimes they picked up one that they hadn't incorporated before. But here we can see their ideas are starting to come together in more constructive ways of their home communities and the impacts that are happening there and how they're seeing them through their eyes with their voices at the center of this work. And from there, we had the kids show each other, these are the themes that we created and here's why. So they did these group presentations where they talked about the different impacts they were seeing and the themes that they as a small group. And at the end, we had the grand conversation where they talked about what did we learn and why do we care? And I want to share with you this quote, and I'm actually going to see if I can get it to play through my computer because it's kind of nice to hear the kids. So let me know if you can hear this. But this was just in the conversation, and the conversation was just, what did you learn? What do you want to talk about? Okay, it wasn't prompted with anything more. So let's see, can you guys hear?
We're young and we're like understanding something, and I want to learn more about climate change, and I think a lot of people in our class also want to learn more, and we could kind of look up to Greta as a role model. So
yeah, I agree with Kylie, and I think that like whatever age you are, you don't have to, or no matter your age, you could be an activist. Like people think that kids they're too young, they won't understand it, but actually we could, and it doesn't matter your age if you want to be an activist or not.
So we saw that across the grand conversation. We didn't ask the kids, do you guys want to be activists? Instead, we said, hey, what'd you all think about this? What'd you learn? What do you want to talk about? And the entire hour-long grand conversation centered around the kids talking about how, if and how they might have agency in the problems that are facing their community based on the impacts that they saw. So what we see here is we're moving kids from having these anxious or kind of negative, hopeless feelings about these larger socioscientific problems by centering them and their ideas and giving them the opportunity and the space to talk about, learn about, research about, and present their ideas, just like scientists do. Those kids were able to productively process those feelings of anxiety or hopelessness into constructive hope. Hey, you know what? We might be fifth graders, but people might listen to us, and we've got these photos. And so what they ended up doing in the end was doing a Twitter campaign with their pictures and putting them up and trying to educate the community about them. So this is one very flexible, very simple strategy that can be brought in your room, not exactly as I described, but using those pieces however might work for you. It's a way to launch investigations. I know some of you guys are doing some of that storyline work, right? Well, here is a great way to activate a storyline that's local and activate a storyline that kids care about. So that's one of the flexible practices that helps us move toward these more justice-centered practices. I'm going to take a pause because I'm going to move to the other one, but I just wanted to give a couple of minutes in case there were questions, comments after photo voice, and we can talk about them at the end as well, but just want to pause really quickly and see if there are any questions that might be generative right in this moment. Okay, moving forward. So again, we're all over the place. right? Like you guys are in different countries. It's kind of hard with NGSS, especially because it's such a state-driven initiative. It can be really difficult to figure out, how do I make this, get my kids to care about this? How do I centralize my kids' identities and who they are and where they come from and the things that they deal with? And these are ways that you guys can do that. So community science data talks is another one. And if you notice, this is community science data from Columbia. This is on precipitation in Columbia. There are lots of ways in all of the places that you all are to find interactive maps about your areas. And it's a really great way to start helping kids make sense of science in their everyday lives. And so again, this was another project that I did in the States and in Columbia. So really quickly, we're going to do a community science data talk right now, a very simple one. What do you notice and what do you wonder? And if you notice, this is in Spanish, because if you are going to look at local data, you're likely going to find it in the language of the country that you are in. But the good thing about data is that you can make sense of it and you can get a partner, which you probably should do, to help you understand that if you're not proficient in the language of the place. But I figured this one was easy enough that people could figure it out if you weren't. So take a minute and just think to yourself, what do you notice? What do you wonder? Put it in the chat if you'd like. High biodiversity. Yep. Thank you, Shan. Lots of biodiversity. Deforestation in 2016, questioning when the depth, asking questions of the data, all great strategies. The ecosystems were represented and chosen. Okay, so we can notice and wonder all sorts of things about this data, right? Now, this data is pretty straightforward. We don't exactly know where it came from. We could ask some questions. We could wonder why certain data was positioned in the way that it was. And these are all great skills for kids to engage with. But the only problem with this data is I still think this is more on the contemporary side, right? It's just facts. They're listing a bunch of stats on Columbia, right? We can do better. We can have kids actually engage with science that has some sort of society view so that kids can get really engaged and try to understand it. And we can also be even more local with our data than just the country. I'm gonna give you a different data talk. Whoops, I forgot about this. And we'll move that. Let's see. I'm gonna do this one first and we'll come back to that. So here's a different data talk. What do you notice and what do you wonder here? Take a minute. Glaciers and where is it? Santiago de Cali is the city that you're looking at. So Cali in Colombia. Yes, Wojtek is remembering this because we did this together. Got a little bit more sense making here. What does the colors represent? So some of us that aren't in Colombia are trying to make sense of the key. That's great. Because can anybody in the group support that might know what the colors represent and type it in? Somebody is noticing that some communes have a greater number of parks and others do not. Very, very astute. Why do communes 1 and 20 have so few parks? Oh, some people are answering. Socioeconomic stratification, blue on the bottom only. Where do you guys think Colegio Bolivar is located on this map? Just out of curiosity. You're cheating. It's in 22. So again, here, still looking at some data and still being able to make sense of some science topics here. But definitely a little bit more kind of centered on at the intersection of science and society, right? So if we go back and we look here at this, like where we're at with NGSS, right? Where we're at is we're doing science, more kids are doing it and they're feeling more agentic about it, right? But we have this opportunity with urban ecology, and there's all sorts of studies coming out now, and it's not just in the States. This happens to be one about redlining as a practice in the United States and how across hundreds of cities we see tree canopy cover, intra-urban heat, and racist housing policies as being interrelated, where we were racist and didn't allow Black and brown people to buy houses, now has less trees and is hotter. That is a pattern across cities in the United States. And there are similar patterns in cities where you are as well. And it's a great opportunity, especially for expats that are working at schools, to build relationships with those folks that have been at the schools for a long time or lived in the cities for a long time to even deeply understand what some of those issues might be. But this is what a data talk really could be if you were able to do it. So if we go back here, what sorts of patterns do you see in the data? What types of data representations do you see? What science concepts are related here? Who would use this data? So these are some questions that you could really probe and dive deeper into this data with your kids. Okay. Or we could ask, who is impacted by this data? Some of you did. Why was this data collected? How might this data be used? How does your own experience compare with this data? If you're a city kid living in the city, you might find yourself. Where do you live? How do you fare, right? Or you could ask, what does this data mean to you? How are you impacted by this data? How do these data make you feel? What can we do with these data? And Wojtek's talking about his own experience here. So these types of questions actually get us to look at the data in lots of different ways. And these questions are baked into a community science data talk. They're part of what you want to do. You want to ask questions that are dominant, which are your content, right? What are the patterns? What are the concepts? What is the DCI here that I want kids to understand? What do I want to probe them for? But then there's this opportunity for the critical. We want our kids to be critical thinkers. We want them to provide evidence when they make a claim, and we want their reasoning to connect that claim and that evidence. But to be able to do that, they have to build critical thinking skills. So we can think about critical goals that we might have for a data talk, like who's impacted? How is it used? Does my experience compare with it? But then the third factor, and this is kind of the heart of my research, is this affective? How do these data make you feel? There's not a lot of time in science class where we ask kids how they feel about the science that they're learning. But I'm going to show you in a minute how important that might be, specifically when we're trying to get kids to become informed and democratic citizens that are able to impact their world. So when we do a community science data talk, and these are different ones in LA, what we do is we put this in our classroom 10-15 minutes at a time, lens by lens by lens. So what we want to do is we want to layer a place with different lenses of data. And then we want to probe for those different types of questions so that kids can make broader sense of these issues in their society, but also make broader sense of how science learning is expansive. We can engage kids in the idea that being a scientist isn't just wearing a white coat. Being a scientist is solving problems in groups. There's a lot of socio-emotional skills involved in being a scientist. There's also a lot of different types of jobs that we don't think about as science. And there's jobs that we don't even know that will exist when our kids are out of our classroom that haven't even been created yet. So allowing kids to interact with local community science data and multiple different lenses on the place not only helps them make broader and better senses of the places that they live, but it also helps them generate a science identity because they're able to attach themselves to one type of thinking or all of these types of thinking. It's an access point for them. So if we see here, these are different lenses, like this was redlining, heat, I think, tree canopy, water. We continue to layer the places with the data. And what do we see happening? Well, we see these three things for the teachers. We see that they're noticing, and Wojtek can speak to this, I think he just did, but when kids are asked, how do these data make you feel? They talk. And when they talk, they make sense of things. There's this entanglement between emotion and place. Because the data is local, the kids are more engaged and more emotionally invested in what they're doing. And planning for asking kids about how they feel about certain data presentations actually generates their knowledge construction. And we see that across. So for example, we notice when we ask, how do these data make you feel? It becomes this access point in the classroom where all of a sudden every kid goes, you know what? I do have emotions and I can express them. And so they will, they'll say them out loud. And it becomes a contagious process where they don't want to sit with negative feelings. Instead, they want to productively process them together. And they want to make sense of these issues in ways that they don't feel hopeless or anxious. They want to feel agentic and understand how they can be a part of these solutions. So what we end up seeing are these pathways. And I can share with you one pathway really quickly. Is we start over here with Ramona, and she says, you know, they're looking at landslides. Somebody brought this up a minute ago. They're looking at landslides and floods, and they're noticing that they're happening more often in their city. And Ramona says, well, I feel worried because like people die because of that. So she's feeling pretty negative about it. And then Leon jumps in. He said, it makes me feel worried. And he contextualizes it. He said, because these people in my community here are the ones that are affected. And once he does that, once he pushes that place in, all of a sudden the conversation and the emotions start to shift from anxiousness and hopelessness to confusion and curiosity, where Jose walks in and says, well, I feel confused because listen, I live here and it says that we're 150 floods and like, I haven't seen 150 floods. So he's questioning the data. We want kids to do that. He's engaging deeply with it. And then finally, Kai says, you know, actually, if you look it up, because she did, it is true. This information is accurate. But the thing is I've never heard of it before. So why am I not hearing about it? Perhaps we should talk more about these things. So we can see how the kids are productively processing these ideas deeply with the data, but also deeply making sense of their context and their agency. And so what that ends up doing, and I'm going to leave you with two ideas at the end of this, and I'll try to play this with this. It ends up kind of creating kids' agency in ways that are really, really important and expansive. And so I'm going to see if you can hear Alfie really quickly talk about
it. What I kind of meant by that is a safe place. What I meant is like, because some people probably don't want to be activists because they think, oh, it may be too risky, or I could get in trouble by people, or I could get hated on, something like that. But if there's a lot of people, like it kind of creates a safe space for people where they can kind of just walk into the giant crowd that is it. And one, the giant crowd will make it safer, and B, it will make it so we have a larger crowd, so it'll therefore most likely be able to like.
So do you feel like you're protected by people with the same ideas as you? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So here we can hear Alfie kind of talking about collective action and trying to understand that and trying to understand why it might be important. And one of the major things that we're finding in my dissertation work, I did this in a privileged environment. So like the kids that you teach at the schools that you teach at, and in an underserved. And the number one finding in the privileged environment was that the students built empathy, that they were building empathy for people that were in their places that didn't have the same access as them. And so particularly for the students that you teach and the students that you work with, this work is really, really valuable because they have access to power. And so them being empathetic, informed citizen is really important. And so giving them opportunities to make sense of these ideas and discuss them through the lens of data or photos or however you do it in flexible ways actually is really helpful. Centering emotion specifically, even more, because what we're finding is that when we do these things like photo voice or community science data talks, and we center emotion and we want them to feel agentic, we find that they go through all of the cognitions we want. They deeply analyze data, they engage in the disciplinary practices, and they learn all sorts of things about science in their city. But the emotion also inspires them to act, inspires them to become agentic citizens. And without it, we still get the cognition, right? They're still learning, but we miss out on that opportunity for them to act. And so if I leave you with nothing, it is that if we really want to talk about equity in science learning, without social justice, without our classrooms working towards social justice, then there can't be equity. And so we're really not talking about much. And so that's kind of where I leave you. And there are more flexible practices, and I have all sorts of resources attached to each one of these practices if you're interested in them. We have teacher guides and all of it. A little too much to get into for 45 minutes today. But you can reach out, and I'm happy to chat with you, hang out with me on Twitter if Twitter still is a thing, I don't know. That's my email if you'd like to reach out and talk more about these flexible practices or get any of the tools that I have available for you to use. And that's it.
All right, let's see those clapping emojis or hands up. Thank you so much, Imogen. That was a wonderful dose of inspiration and concrete practices to start a Deepening Your Practices conference with. So it's just so timely and great to hear. I also wanted to put this slide back up, which we took from Imogen's slide, because we are going to get to talk about this now and process it with our partnership friends here. So in a moment, we're going to be opening breakout rooms. And what we'd like you to really think about is thinking about these instructional shifts and some of the inspirational and very practical content that Imogen shared with us. How can we shift towards that right side of the spectrum towards justice? So what can we do? This is a call to action. What can we do in our classrooms or in our roles to deepen our practice and really respond to that call to action by cultivating hope and orienting our science practices around justice? So this is very flexible. You can let the conversation flow, but in a moment, you'll select your breakout rooms for job alike. Coaches and admin, you may either go into a coaches admin coordinators room, or you can go with the section that you work most closely with, whatever you feel like is going to be best for your conversation. Take a moment to build that partnership, share who's in the room, what's your name, what do you teach, where are you from? And then move into those questions about how you're engaging your students and really how you would like to deepen your practice by responding to that call to action for hope and justice in your classroom. So we'll leave you in those breakout rooms, let's see, for about 15 minutes. So just be mindful of the time. And again, if your breakout room gets too big, we're going to open several breakout rooms for each level. So just keep it to 6 or 7 participants maximum, so everybody gets a chance to share and discuss. All right. Breakout rooms are opening, and if you could please make your best effort, even if it's an awkward eating your dinner moment, to camera on and mic on. If you have that capability, we would really appreciate it. Here we go. If anyone does not see the button prompt and you'd like some Zoom assistance, we are happy to help you. Just write it in the chat or let us know and we can move you manually.